Let me introduce to you Councilman Mike Bonin, who is the chair of the Transportation Committee for City Council, plus also he's a member of the Budget Committee, Budget and Finance Committee. So I have Councilman Blumenfield and Councilman Bonin here. So I think I have almost one more. I think I can get anything I want done. Councilman Bonin I've known him before as a chief of staff, but also now as a council member. But really, he stands for enhancing our transportation system and how to make travel from your home to work to school safer, easier. So he's a big champion for the Expo line. Recently, I've seen him talk about the Expo line because he used it. But he's also on the board of Metro. And I know he's been advocating for regional solutions and what we need to do. But he's always been advocating for environmental justice. He's an advocate for the homeless. He's an advocate for, putting neighborhoods first and providing services. And he's been a great supporter for us in Streets LA and transportation and investing in our infrastructure. So, it's just, I can't say more about Bob, about Mike and his efforts to really help us transform our streets, our sidewalks, our trees, and provide services to the community and the neighborhoods while providing housing and while we're doing it in an equitable and fair way. So please help me welcome Councilman Mike Bonin.
Thank you, Adele, and good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who are from out of town, welcome to Los Angeles. For those of you who are from Los Angeles, you listen to me all the time. You can just go back to your meal, enjoy what you were doing. For those of you who are from out of town, let me welcome you here to Los Angeles. You're here at a very interesting time in our city's history. You're here at a time of great change, at a time when we're trying to pivot into a new and a better way of doing things. And that also means you're here at a time of some chaos. And if you happen to fly into LAX and try to use Uber or Lyft to get out, you experienced some of the chaos that is coming with the change here in Los Angeles. For a long time, Los Angeles has been a city that hasn't really known how to use its roads. It has used them only for vehicles and has ignored the fact that that's not how everybody lives. That everybody walks and many people cycle, and many people are hungry, crying, demanding for an alternative to being stuck in a single occupancy vehicle here in Los Angeles. And so as we are combating climate change and trying to come up with streets and a public works program that is cleaner and greener and more sustainable, we're also trying to find a way to use our existing roads, that very limited real estate, to come up with a transportation system that is more fair, that is more accessible, that is more safe, that is more efficient, and that is more equitable than the one we have had for a long time. Our voters here are hungry for that. Every time we go to them and we say we want to invest more in a different and a better way of doing things, they say yes. They have said yes to Measure R, they have said yes to Measure M, they have said yes to Proposition O, they have said yes continuously to better ways of investing in transportation and in our public works infrastructure. And now we're trying to deliver on all of that. And all of the people who say yes when we go to the ballot don't necessarily come out to a lot of the town hall meetings when we do the ground level projects, and then we hear from a lot of other people. And every time we do that, we hear from people who say, we're not London, we're not Portland, we're Los Angeles. And by that, they mean to say that we should not try to do things better, and we should not learn from the example of cities that are doing things differently and doing things better. And what I love about this conference here today is that there are some of you here today that we are eager and hungry to learn more from. And there are some of you here today who no doubt are eager to learn from the incredible leadership of Adele and the team that he has put together in transforming our Public Works Department. And you heard from Salita, our visionary leader of Department of Transportation. So I'm thrilled that you're doing this, Adele. I'm glad to show up because you asked, because you and your department always show up when I ask. So enjoy your time in Los Angeles. Enjoy the meal. Have a good afternoon.
All right. So what's happening in 2028? Anybody? The Olympics. The Olympics. I've been impressed with the fact that Streets LA, the mayor, Adele have begun to mobilize their internal efforts in order to begin to think and prepare for that. And today, we have some people in the audience, as well as a guest from London who's going to be talking about the Olympics, and we can have some dialogue about that. Because there's preparation, there's operation, there's a lot of change that needs to happen for that. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who happens to have been heavily involved in the 2012 London Olympics. And our guest is Richard Sanderson, who's a director of transportation planning for UK and Europe for Jacobs. And he has had major planning and operational leadership responsibilities associated with the London Olympics. And so I think he has a lot of lessons learned and information to share. Richard? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott, and thank you very much indeed for inviting me and for having me here today. It's a real honour. So, I've got plenty of slides. I'm going to try and rattle through them quite quickly. Please ask me some questions at the end if I'm a bit quick on a few things. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview of London Olympics and transport in London, a little bit on governance and planning, some of the work that was done on data and analytics, particularly during the planning phase, the sort of phase you're in at the moment in LA. Then we're going to look a little bit about planning to and between venues, the operations, what happened during games time, and then some of the outcomes and legacy and lessons learned from the process. So, London Olympics was awarded in July 2005. That gave us 7 years to plan for it. It's slightly different to yourselves. You've got slightly longer because of the unique way in which you've been given the Olympics at the same time as Paris. So I worked on it through for all 7 of those years. The Games of the 30th Olympiad ran through July and August 2012. All nations of the world competed, nearly 11,000 athletes. We had 9 million tickets sold, and we had over 1 million international visitors into our city. Equally successful was the Paralympic Games a couple of weeks later. A large number of NOCs competed, over 4,000 athletes, nearly 3 million tickets sold. And we had a lot of live sites, something called the Cultural Olympiad, and lots of unticketed events, which I think are also planned in LA as well. They're uniquely challenging to plan for from a transportation perspective, because you can't monitor, you can't work out where people are, where they're going to, particularly for things like the cycling and the marathon. Hundreds of thousands of people turned up, and how we actually manage that is very difficult. The 2 maps you'll see on the right show London. We had venues across the UK, particularly for the soccer, and I know to say that, not football, because you get confused. But then in London and around London was where most of the venues were. They're shown there. The map at the top is for the Olympics, and for the bottom is the Paralympics. I'd like to draw your attention to 3 areas that probably don't come out desperately well, which are the 3, what we call zones. I think you've got 5 clusters here. There's one in central London for the really iconic places that we've got around Lord's Cricket Ground, the Mall where Buckingham Palace is, and the Horse Guards Parade. We had a second zone, which was down in the southeast of London, called the River Zone, which was really where we had 4 major venues down there. And then we had Olympic Park itself, which was with the picture on my first slide, where we had the main stadium, some of the other competition venues, and the Olympic Village. That's an area of massive urban regeneration. I'll come on to that in a moment. So, transport in London, I'm not going to contradict or say anything that Tony said. He's already been through all that already, so I won't go into a lot of detail about what we've got there. But I will draw your attention to the map in the top right-hand corner, which shows London's transit network, the metro, the underground, and the rail network, with the 3 zones superimposed on it. And as you can see, they're slightly different in the way in which we had particular challenges in transportation. So the red zone in the middle, in central London, is heavily, densely populated in terms of the transit network, very easy to get to, but incredibly busy and very, 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 very busy at all times of the day. The river zone down in the southeast, the grey area, was much less heavily provided for by transit. There was a lot of commuter rail, a lot of bus in that area of London, which gave us other challenges, which I'll come on to later. And then we had Olympic Park itself, which is in blue, which is mainly served by a station called Stratford, which is about 4 miles outside central London. That is very well connected. It has 8 lines. It has 4 transit lines and some light rail as well going into it. And for the Olympics, there was a special service that ran from central London out to Olympic Park. It was called the Javelin. It ran on the high-speed rail service, which is called Eurostar, which runs between London and Paris, and it was shuttle in about 7 minutes between the two. That service was called the Javelin. The train looks like a Javelin, super exciting, but when we were doing the planning for it, we made sure that we had resilience in the network, so we had other services as well. So there's 2 other heavy rail services into London, and we gave them nicknames. There was the semi-fast one from Liverpool Street in central London, which we called the Discus, and then there was the very, very slow, ploddy one to the south of him, which we called the Shot Put. And the Discus and the Shot Put were equally as important to the Javelin when it comes to planning. I'll explain in a moment. So we spent about $15 billion, actually, on improvements to the network prior to the Olympics, including signalling and rolling stock upgrades on our networks, extensions to our light rail schemes, but also really investing in new and upgraded walking and cycling facilities. Probably doesn't come out desperately well, but the area to the green and the right of the words there shows you the network of cycling and walking that was put up around both the Olympic Park and the river zones that we were in there. Really important part of the legacy from the scheme, coming to that a little bit later. And a lot about urban realm, particularly around Olympic Park, particularly around central London, ensuring that our sidewalks, I've said pavements there, and our roadways were perfect for when the world turned up. And finally, we need to run the games alongside one of the world's busiest transportation systems, which came with it with many, many challenges. And nobody thought we would do it. So there we go, there's the BBC, there's our flag carrier for news saying a year out from the event that the biggest risk to the successful delivery of London 2012 was its transport. And then over to the right, one of our national newspapers, The Independent, saying that the Jubilee line, which is the main arterial route into Olympic Park from central London on the underground network, is its biggest risk to the transport plans. So we had an uphill battle in terms of where people were coming with us in terms of our ability to deliver the transport for the Olympics. So, a little bit on governance. The Olympics were set up with the Olympic and Paralympic Acts of 2006, set in statute, and it set the broad governance, which is shown in the diagram in the top right. The Olympic Board, which was an oversight and dispute resolution set up, but really the 3 authorities below that were key to the delivery of the Games. The first one was the Olympic Delivery Authority, which was a public company set up to deliver the infrastructure and to do the coordination for the Games, and it provided the park and ride system that we had for people coming from out of town. LOCOG, which was the organising committee, was a private company that ran the Games and fulfilled London's obligation as a host city to the Olympics, particularly to the IOC and the IPC. It delivered Olympic family transport, it provided venue transport, and it dealt with the last mile issues which have been discussed earlier. But actually, transport in London is not delivered by either of those organisations. The transport is delivered by partners. So the main one of those partners was TfL, who Tony works for, which is the executive agency of London Government, which provides the transit across the city. Our commuter rail, national rail networks, are actually run privately by train operating companies, otherwise known as TOCs. They were key partners, as was Network Rail, so the tracks and the stations in the UK are actually owned publicly, the trains and services are privately, Network Rail was a key stakeholder, and Highways Agency, which is actually our national freeway agency, were also incredibly important. So they delivered the people, the Olympic Delivery Authority, they say, created the theatre, and LOCOG put on the show. So it was incredibly important that the 3 of those entities worked incredibly well together. And during Games time, they worked very closely. There was a senior responsible officers group set up with people across those organisations. There was a transport board set up, and then there was 2 key organisations, a London Operations Board chaired by TfL, and a National Operations Board chaired by the ODA. And Tony's mentioned this previously, but they're all the roundels at the time for TfL. The other thing we had as well is not only did we have all of those different stakeholders, but TfL in themselves, and it's probably fair to say, Tony, are themselves a dozen different stakeholders when you're coming in from the outside. Each of those different elements of the business has different things they need to do, and we need to make sure that everybody was on the same page. So, in terms of the transport plans, there's sort of 3 phases we went through. The first one was the bidding phase, what you've just been through now, trying to sell London as the city. And that was really saying that London would be a catalyst for immense, largest urban industrial wasteland regeneration project in Europe, and to provide a lasting sporting and transportation legacy. We then had the planning phase from 2006 to 2010. You probably got a slightly longer one because you've got an extra few years. But that was really around setting up the first London transport plan for the Olympics. And 2 key things it set out there. The first one was the Olympics would be accessible for all, both the Olympics and the Paralympics, but also this claim that London would be the first full public transport, or in your terms, transit games, aiming for 100% of spectators to arrive by public transport through walking, cycling through the summer of 2012 with free spectator travel cards available to everyone. Then we had the operations phase, which ran really from 2011 to 2012. You'll find out yourselves that after the previous Olympics, after Paris is finished, everybody will start turning up in your city, telling you how to run your city. That's super great. There's a 2-year period of transition, and then really the operational part starts probably a year, so about 18 months to 2 years out. That gave us our second transport plan, which is shown on the right. And then the key words for us really was legacy. We had a legacy, TfL had a legacy plan, and from 2013 onwards, we've been driving forward that legacy. So, during the planning phase, during the 4 years that we had to start looking in a lot of detail about how we would actually plan for the games. There was no point in waiting for tickets to be sold, for hotels to be booked, to be able to work out where people were going to be staying, where they're going to be going, what network they're going to be using. So therefore, we had to come up with some hypothetical models and data and analytics around how people would move around the network to allow us to properly plan. Transit networks, road networks take a lot of time to plan. They can't be just turned on and off overnight, and therefore we need to do some work on this. So I spent a lot of time personally working with the ODA and TfL on this. There's not a lot of data available on things like this. Each Olympics is unique. We have data sources available from the Sydney Olympics and from the Athens Olympics. We also had some very useful information from the Manchester Commonwealth Games, which is a sort of 40% size version of the Olympics, which is mainly for members of the British Commonwealth. And we had surveys from other events such as the Wimbledon Tennis, Badminton Horse Trials and the Marathon. And from that information and with TfL's models and expertise, we managed to build together a data and analytics setup that will allow us to start planning for the Games 6 or 7 years out. We need to build in the flexibility and uncertainty so that either if there were changing plans from the organising committee, where there were changes to the non-ticketed events, and then when actually the ticketing data and the hotel data actually finally arrived in 2011, we had enough of an idea of what was going on and to allow us to properly plan for things going forward. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail about the diagram at the bottom. I'm a transport modeller by background. I find that fascinating. I'm sure many people here probably don't. But what I will say is that there's a few key things to look at there that's really important, even if you're this far out and you're not quite sure how things are going to work. There is information from other games available. What's incredibly important is to understand potentially the number of visitors going to come into your city from outside, the number of them is going to stay over, the number of people that were day visitors. The transport challenge that we had was very dependent, was very sensitive to those sorts of assumptions. And then also the arrival and departure profile from venues. As we went through the Olympics, particularly as we had some terrorist issues in London at the start of the process, increasing force and security meant we needed much, much greater time required for people to enter the venues. That requires people to be changing their times very much earlier than you would have personally thought, and that in itself causes major problems in our network because suddenly events that might be starting at 11 o'clock in the morning are now impacting on our morning peak. So those sorts of assumptions and testing those out were incredibly important, and we developed these analytical tools, handed them back to colleagues at TfL Streets and also at TfL Planning to allow them to be able to look at the analysis of what was going on in the network. And what we finished up then is this sort of static analysis, and you can't see that, it's probably deliberate so that you can't start picking these places out, to show actually on an hourly basis through some key parts of the day how congested, say, our transit network would be. That's the London Underground network showing levels of density. For the benefit of people out there, the black shows a standing density of about 4 to 7 people per square metre. So if you can imagine 4 to 7 of the people here standing together, that's how congested that would be for an hour. It's not very comfortable, and it's also not very operationally resilient. The diagram at the top there was from a gentleman called Graham Curry at Monash University in Melbourne, and that was just showing the level of background demand in the blue, and then the level of additional demand that we were putting on the network during the Olympic Games. The key planning day was the infamous Day 7, which was the first day of the first Friday of operations, really, where we were trying to put an extra 20-25% of demand onto the network at the same time as a normal Friday. And it's not only the amount of traffic we were putting on the network, it was the fact that it was clashing with the PM peak, which is a very, very busy time of the year, time of the week, as people were leaving London to go to places outside for the weekend. So, We had all that data, we'd sort of developed that over the first 4 years. We had a great understanding of what was going to go on, but we needed to start to make it more detailed, make it more real. So the first thing around about 2 years out is, 2 or 3 years out, we started with local area traffic management plans. So the diagrams at the bottom left there show that we're moving very much from the aggregate planning down to the detail, looking at individual cars, looking at individual pedestrians, both in terms of the microscopic modelling of both central London and venues, but also looking at pedestrian movements at Olympic Park. That's the black thing that looks like a spider at the bottom, a hand at the bottom. That's actually pedestrian movements through Olympic Park. And indeed, our main station, so Waterloo East, is a main station in central London that serves the river zone that we were working on with Network Rail, really understanding how the pressure points we're going to have in the system. And then allowing us then to work with security and work with local to work out how we'd actually manage and plan movements through the Olympic Games. LATMP is shown there on the right. That is really looking at the impacts on traffic within about 2 miles of the venues, boiling down there really to that last mile for the time we're taking over for the venue transport operations plans, which can be shown on the right. And they're really about the detailed interface between background traffic, Olympic Games traffic, Games family traffic, spectators and athletes, and also with the massive security overlay that I mentioned earlier on. So really that last 18 months is where that really, really key detailed planning takes place. So then moving between venues, so that's around what you would do at venues. When it gets between venues, we had an Olympic route network. I think you've also got Olympic route network. It's a standard practice nowadays. We had core routes, which really got you from central London out to the main venues in East London. We had specific routes down to outlying. So you see the one on the bottom left takes you down to Wimbledon where the tennis is. The one on the left takes you out to Heathrow Airport. Getting to and from the airport is incredibly important. There's active traffic management on the routes, which meant that we didn't have to have them running all the time. We could turn them off. If things were going extra well, if our monitoring showed that things were going great, we could turn it off and allow all traffic to use the games. And then that was overlaid by a massive statutory process that we needed to be bringing into these Olympic route networks to actually be able to get the planning process in place to allow us to actually deliver the changes to the network that we needed, which we did from about 2 to 3 years out. The other thing we did was travel demand management. So this was key to taking the analytics I was talking about previously, integrating that with the data that we had regarding hotel bookings and ticket sales, and that started coming through in 2011, and looking at how we could start to manipulate, for want of a better word, the sorts of movements we're having on the background of the network to provide us with the space to be able to overlay the Olympic traffic on top. So TDM was first introduced in Sydney and the Olympics Games time, and London's aim was to reduce the background traffic, both in terms of transit and highway traffic, by 25 to 30%. The key pillars to this were the four mantras of reduce, reroute, retime and remode, getting people away from key hotspots. And we developed the analytics that I talked about earlier to a model called GLIM that allowed us to provide real understanding of these elements and the impact on network operations. And this is some of the early work that was done with ourselves, TfL colleagues and TfL Streets colleagues, both in terms of the hotspots and the transit network, in terms of you really don't want to be going anywhere near a train station when it's red, and also on the highway network showing, in a bit less detail, it's a bit more difficult on the highways network to be able to pinpoint where the impact's going to be, the sort of no-go areas during Olympic operations. A couple of other areas of further plans that we did. The first one was about business. It's a massive opportunity, the Olympics, for businesses in and around your city. But there is an impact to the travel disruption that you get from the Olympics. TfL offered free consultancy advice and workshops to organisations about their employees changing the way that they travel to work. But there's also an impact on logistics in terms of deliveries, parking, stopping restrictions around, say, hotels, and the removal. So TfL removed overnight delivery limits to try and mitigate these impacts with an associated code of practice, and set up a freight forum and had journey planners to allow people to be able to plan the way in which they run their businesses during the Games. The other element was about planning for resilience. TfL's transit network had a pretty high level of resilience to Olympic Park. It had 8 rail services, Sydney had 1, Athens had 2. And so if the Javelin went down, we always had the shot put and the discus. If one of the tube networks went down, we always had other alternatives to get people there. We provided long-term upgrades, like you're doing here with your 28 by 28, to improve transit resilience and performance. But we also had a programme of extra preventative maintenance, both on the transit network and, importantly, on the ORN. So ensuring that the excellent work you're doing on filling potholes and maintaining the assets actually runs through the 2 days, because if you start having potholes or breaking up the surface during the games time family are not going to be very happy. Then we also had rapid response teams out, making sure the network was operating to its optimum, and all upgrade works on any part of the network was suspended for 4 weeks before the games. So going back to the narrative of this, which is the analytics it goes through, what did we do when we actually got to games time? When we started operationalisation of these analytics, operationalisation is not a word I come across until the Olympics, not really seen it much since, which was really to take the stuff that we'd done and actually put it into a journey planner to allow people to actually be able to plan their journeys properly. So you see the ones on the left, which is around transit movements, allows you by 15-minute segment through the Olympics, by each day, to look at the network hotspots where the stations and areas which are going to be really busy, then provide you with the information about how to rechange your journeys to make things better and where to avoid. Similarly, on the highways network on the right, you will see as you move through each 15-minute segment, it shows you where to avoid. And then when you click through, it gives you details of exactly the sort of changes that was happening on a half-hourly basis across the network. In terms of bringing everything together, there was a transport coordination centre, which all key partners that I mentioned earlier were co-located in a TfL office. Included live analytics feeds, so the models and analytics as shown you previously were live running through the night to allow us to, in the morning, provide more details back to be able to understand how the network is going to operate. I understand that by 2028, that might be done by machine learning and artificial intelligence, but I would say the one key thing to that is that nothing beats a good old-fashioned highways engineer, transit engineer who actually goes in and provides an overlay of expense over the top of that, because sometimes these models cannot be quite right. And that was tested out. You can see the people in the room. It worked very well. It worked through test events that TfL had going for the Torch Relay and also the Queen's Jubilee a few weeks before the Olympics started. And it also managed the additional services we often had to put on. So, for example, if trains left people behind at stations and they were the last service of the night, we need to take those people home, whether it's by bus services or whether it's by taxi. So the operations of TDM was incredibly important to what happened in London. So that was a set of campaigns. You see the posters, which went down very well. The use of traditional media, so newspapers, the London Evening Standard and the Metro, but also increasingly social media, but obviously since the Olympics has now gone up exponentially, particularly the Twitter feed, got ahead of the games, which was incredibly important, keeping people up to date. But also the wider campaign for about a year, 18 months, which was called the Big Scare, I think in retrospect, around getting people off the network. So you can see there that the news again, you can see the analytics I showed before being presented on the BBC News website, which is one of the world's biggest red news agencies. And also the Commissioner of Transport for London, Tony's master boss at the time, advising people to go for a beer and to avoid delays in the Olympics and just basically don't bother going anywhere and just keep themselves off the network. So that's very helpful from Peter. So, what were the outcomes of all these things? So this is a table that shows everything. I'm not going to go through in a lot of detail. I've got a summary. So 35% of regular travellers changed their travel, 20% of them reduced their travel, and 15% changed. Some retimed, some rerouted, and some changed mode. Underground travel was actually up 35% on the previous year for the period during the games. Rail travel up 26%. So that was going up, but at the same time, traffic in central and inner London went down by 16% in the morning peak. That meant that actually the forecast journey times that we had for the Games family were much quicker than we thought, so it was all win-win. And actually that meant that for 60% of the operational time, which was 18 hours a day, we didn't actually need to use the Olympic route network just for Games family. We could actually use it just for general traffic. And Graham Curry's research showed that one of the key reasons that it worked so well is that many people followed the advice from TfL and partners and changed the way that they travelled during the Games, therefore avoiding the busiest time and places. And which meant that, there we go, the BBC, who had said 18 months previously that everything was going to be a disaster, was actually saying that everything was going to be fine. And in fact, it was a success. So, final slide. What's the legacy and what lessons learned? So, TfL did some excellent work on legacy. There's the obvious legacy of the $15 million investment in the infrastructure, which you're doing here. There's a huge urban regeneration in East London. But we also had a long-term active travel boost. Now, there's a bit of an argument about whether this is down to the Olympics or it's down to other things, but we see much more walking, we see much more cycling than we ever did before, and we'll at least say the Olympics was a catalyst if it's not actually the reason behind it. We've seen 15% of travellers changing their long-term travel patterns through to TDM, and the analytics that was undertaken, the ticketing, the journey planning, and in fact the work we did for avoiding hotspots is still used to this day for planning in TfL when there are perturbations on the network. Finally, the transport planning lessons learnt, which came from the ODA, which was to start demand forecasting early, share these forecasts with stakeholders and to update. You've got a huge number of stakeholders here, you've got a huge number of municipalities and operating entities to understand, get everybody on the same page, integrating transport plan with other functional areas, particularly security and logistics, cooperation between all entities to get the integrated vision. Road events through the city centre look great, the cycling down Pall Mall look great, but it's an absolute pain to actually manage from a transportation viewpoint. The Games family, if there's high quality transit, will actually use transit rather than use their Lexuses and Mercedes that they're meant to use. TDM and active traffic management actually worked extra well and helped to a great conclusion. And modelling tools should be used widely and wisely to help plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. You can stay up. You can stay up here, Richard. It's complex. He talks fast. He covered a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
There's a lot
Apologies.
to do. But I'd like to, we can open it up for some dialogue. But I'd like to ask John Belinsky from the District 7 Caltrans director to come up, as well as Rick Clark, Metro Program Manager, because both are involved with their agencies in helping to prepare for the Olympics. So we want to hear from them. But if someone wants to ask a question of Richard while we're waiting for them to come up, feel free. Who has a question for Richard? Yes, and I'm going to hand you the mic.
Maybe.
Yeah. Just real quick, did you hire a consultant, or how did you come up with the TDM process?
It was interesting. I think fair to say it was probably a combined effort. I think at the time, actually, it was a mixture of the two. It finished up being led by a guy called Stuart Reid, I think was a consultant at the time, and then went over to work with TfL and is still there. So there's still a lot of the TDM expertise is still within TfL, but it was augmented by consultants at the same time. We do TDM more generally for day-to-day travel, but I think it's probably the first time it's been used in such a way for shifting people for major events. And now we do it as a bit of a matter of course, to be honest.
You can stay there, Richard. I am going to turn over the mic first to Rick Clark to say a few words about his Olympic preparations.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Adele, for inviting me here. I'm Rick Clark. I'm the Chief Program Manager at LA Metro. We're the transit operator, planner, builder for transit in LA County. We're doing a lot to prepare for the Olympics. We have a lot of jobs under construction right now. It's $18 billion in projects. Some of the notable ones are the Crenshaw LAX line, which will finally bring rail to LAX Airport. We have a separate project to build a new station there. And this it's not an average station. It's a $500 million station. Mayor Garcetti calls it the gateway to Los Angeles. That will connect with the people mover that the airport is building, and it's all scheduled to be open by 2023. We're building a regional connector project, which is a downtown subway to connect all our light rail. And our biggest project is the Purple Line projects, which is 9 miles of subway, largely under Wilshire Boulevard. And I've been told they must be open by the Olympics or else, and I don't want to find out what the or else means. But a lot of the venues are out towards UCLA. And just a quick story about that. When LA was applying to have the Olympics, we were applying for the 2024 Olympics. And when the International Olympic Committee announced 2028, that was the best day of my life. I would like to get a copy of the presentation and probably some of the backup information. I think it would be very helpful to Metro, and it's probably something we should keep in dialogue with TfL.
That's fantastic. You can stay up here, and we'll turn it over to John for some comments.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to come up here and speak. How many of you went to the 1984 Olympics in LA? What was the message?
Stay home.
Stay home. So the message that, and the reason why LA was awarded, one of the reasons, that LA was awarded the 2028 is they don't want you to stay home. We want you to participate. We want you to attend. We have a route network already existing. One of the other selling points was the fact that we did have that network, and we're not going to invest a significant amount of resources into that network to make improvements, to widen, or to add lanes. We're going to invest in transit opportunities. That doesn't mean we're going to completely ignore the highway network. We're going to do some improvements. And the 28 by 28 group of projects include a couple of those. One is the I-10 Express Lanes project, which is currently under construction. The other one is the famous 405 South Curve project, which most of you are probably familiar with. So putting those type of investments in. Right now, we're just starting the effort to identify what the Olympic route network is going to consist of. And that is going to connect. We can steal a lot of the slides that were here for the London Games because it's going to connect all those venues. Currently, you have about 6 venues that are being considered, and we'll be working over the course of the next several years to get that route network solidified, make improvements on it, and then get you to the games.
Thanks, John. So we've learned that it's about collaboration, it's about one world, and it's about stealing. And we're all for that. That's come up a few times, but that's what we're in it for, is to learn from each other and to steal what we can from that experience. We have time. We do have a lot more still to cover and some other topic areas, but any other burning questions that people have for any of these 3 people? No burning questions? You will have a lot of questions. So let's give these speakers a hand. Thank you. So we're going to move into a new topic of cool pavement, as well as technology as a new topic area. I'd like to introduce first Streets LA's very own Greg Spotts, Bureau of Street Services Assistant Director, who is going to speak with us today about cool streets. He also serves as the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Bureau, shaping policies supporting active transportation, climate change adaptation, vehicle emission reduction, and the adaptation of sustainable construction practices. Go for it, Greg.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Can we try that again? Good afternoon, everybody. All right, I'm powered by baklava, so you guys got to watch out. That was a really good dessert back there. I'm Greg Spotts. I'm Chief Sustainability Officer of our agency, and I also oversee the Maintenance, Urban Forestry, and Investigation and Enforcement divisions, which is about 600 professionals filling potholes, street cleaning, trimming 700,000 street trees in our urban forest, and enforcing the codes pertaining to the public right-of-way. And I want to take you through kind of an innovation journey and give you a little bit of the backstage of this journey, because it's ongoing and we're learning a lot, and every time we learn something, new questions arise. And I think it's illustrative of the larger challenge as we face a warming world. It's here, it's already warming. How many people here think the neighborhood they live in is getting warmer? from your own personal experience? Look at that, it's a lot of hands up. I live in Santa Monica. I live on 7th Street, so that's 6 blocks from the ocean. And we used to have a marine layer in June that we called June Gloom, and that kept the neighborhood nice and cool all the way till the midday. And there's almost no marine layer at all anymore. It's sunny in June in the morning at 8 a.m. when you drive to work, and it's much hotter and it's humid. It was never humid in my first 17 years in Santa Monica, and the last 3 summers have been more humid. And in order for all of us to adapt to this changing environment, we're going to have to try new things and rediscover a few old things while we're at it. And there aren't always going to be really easy answers, but we're going to have to be nimble. So what's the heat island effect? That's the fact that the built-up city tends to be 10 degrees Fahrenheit to 15 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than regular countryside outside the city. Here, there really is no regular countryside outside the city. There's 12 million people in this county, and unless you get over several mountain ranges, it's completely built out. But the asphalt and concrete and steel and glass that we build in our cities retains heat, and it makes those places warmer. And that's a challenge as we get into a warming world. We thought when we started this journey, we were maybe looking at trying to reduce air conditioning use and the associated carbon emissions, but it turns out this is really a public health initiative. LA is one of the only cities in America that has heat-related deaths in the winter. We can have a hot spell in January or February that catches vulnerable populations unaware, the elderly, the young, people with certain health conditions, and we literally have hundreds of emergency room visits during these warm spells. And so adapting to a warmer city is literally the difference between having a very rising number of deaths and illnesses related to heat or managing that trend. So I just got these a few days ago. It's exciting to be in an emerging topic because there's constantly new data and new studies. Some folks at Jet Propulsion Laboratory put a thermal camera on the International Space Station. And this camera doesn't have a map. And look at this, on a summer night in 2018, the roads start to glow in this thermal camera. And on the left, you're talking right before midnight, but on the right, it's 4 a.m. and you can still see the roads, the airports, and the port. So, the nighttime recharge is a very important part of the public health equation in urban heat because we need to refresh at night from the heat we've been exposed to during the day, while our built infrastructure is retaining heat and radiating it to us all night, even to 4 o'clock in the morning. And this is the issue that we're exploring, trying to figure out how to mitigate. Wow, LA is going to get a lot hotter. Look at these neighborhoods over here on the kind of upper left of the slide. Porter Ranch, Woodland Hills. Out of the rim of our city, they already have 50 days a year of 95 degrees Fahrenheit or above. And in some of those neighborhoods, that's going to reach 100 days. Can you imagine having 100 warm days a year? It's very warm days. This is the issue that we're trying to start addressing. So a very exciting thing that's happened, and it was percolating in our agency, and I've been leading it, but it's really been turbocharged since the arrival of our dynamic general manager, Adel Hashkhalil. I really feel sort of unleashed as our chief sustainability officer under his leadership. And we've kind of come to the really powerful realization that our agency controls most of the levers that you could use to address urban heat. We control the bus shelters. We control shade structures in public right-of-way. We control the surfaces of the streets and sidewalks. The only part we don't control is the roofs on private buildings. And that's an area where LA is already leading. We started out with cool roof incentives from LA Department of Water and Power that led to cool roof requirements in the building code. Can anybody guess how many million square feet of cool roofs there are in LA? Somebody throw out a guess. Give me some number in the millions.
10 million.
How many? Increase the bidding. Who's got a better one? There's 33 million square feet of cool roofs in LA as a result of that public policy success. And what we're doing in the public right-of-way is a much earlier stage and much smaller, but we aspire to have that kind of success. So here's a thermal image of just a little piece of, urban life. You've got an asphalt parking lot, and look how that asphalt road, look how that roadway is bright red. It's the hottest. And then you've got a concrete parking lot on the lower left in gray, and just that different surface is in green. It's not in red, it's cooler. And this is kind of what we wanted to start exploring. Why is it that different surfaces retain more or less heat? And it turns out that you can measure this by solar reflectance. What percent of the sun's energy does a given surface retain rather than reflect? And our brand new black asphalt streets, they retain 90 to 95% of the sun's radiation. And it requires a mindset change because our constituents think black means new and new means good. A black road is exciting. Somebody cared. Somebody took care of our road. Well, that black road just left the neighborhood hotter than it was before. Now, we have a few streets that are made out of concrete. We're not putting in new concrete streets today, but in the 1920s and other times we had concrete streets. And those reflect 35 to 40% of the sun's energy. But interestingly, over a 6-year period, the asphalt fades and the concrete gets dirty. So they start to converge, but they never meet. So that lighter concrete surface, even when dirty, is quite a bit cooler than the black asphalt surface, even when faded. And we were interested in 2 questions. Could a pavement coating make asphalt behave in a thermal way more like concrete? And B, had anybody ever tried it in California? We found a report from the city of Chula Vista. They hired a consultant because they wanted to try some cool pavements. And the report in 2014 said not a single cool pavement treatment had been tried on a public street in California. And we set out a goal to give Mayor Garcetti the win of LA being the first city in California to try a cool pavement coating on a public street. And before we did that, we're risk averse here in Public Works. We wanted to make sure it was safe, so we tried it in a parking lot. It took a while to find some coatings. Interestingly, the environmental community was very passionate about this issue. We've been working closely with Climate Resolve and Berkeley Labs. And the scientific community and the environmental community felt like cool surfaces was a slam dunk, but we found nobody had tried it, and we wanted to know why. What's the gap? How do we bridge that gap? And one of the gaps was there really weren't a lot of commercially available products, and even the products the federal government was promoting, some of those vendors had already gone bankrupt. Those products weren't available. We finally found a product called Guard Top Cool Seal, and this company produces a standard black coating where, you own a strip mall, you want to freshen it up, you put down their black coating and restripe it, and it looks a little bit new. And then they started exploring the market for asphalt playgrounds and schoolyards, and they came up with several different colors of the coating, and they found out the gray one had a higher solar reflectance and turned out to be cooler. So they started marketing the gray one as a cool seal, and that's the product we used here. We had the vendor apply it at their expense in the summer of 2015. And what we did that was pretty neat is right across this median here was black pavement. And the pavement actually transmits heat laterally across it. So we were able to have use that mediator as like a thermal insulator and compare the temperature of the coated pavement on the right and the black asphalt on the left. And we found that as the summer day progressed, a temperature differential of the surface kept growing. 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Fahrenheit, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, peaking at about 10 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit in the late afternoon. We thought that was significant. We thought that was worth further exploration. And so we went to the mayor and council, and we got about $150,000 to do a pilot on public streets. And in the summer of 2017, we installed a cool pavement coating on 1 city block in each of the 15 council districts in Los Angeles. And, I gotta say, if you wanna get good PR, it's all about timing. The first weekend we installed, the first location was the hottest weekend of 2017 to date. It was mid-May, And every assignment editor at all the local TV news stations was like, give me a hot weather story. It's so hot, we need hot stories. And so I ended up doing a stand-up with every one of the 5 local TV stations because we installed it on a really hot weekend. And Fox News even fried an egg on the black pavement and it wouldn't fry on our cool pavement, which was pretty exciting. So we thought this was a good first step. We were getting pretty good results. By the way, I'm on Twitter. I'm Spotnik on Twitter. And I'm proud to say that Curbed LA has said that I have a gloriously nerdy Twitter feed. And if you're looking for gloriously nerdy, you know right where to go. It's all kind of urban planning and city shaping stuff. So here's a tweet that I sent out about 2 months after this was installed. And you can see it is getting dirty. If you wear white clothes and you order a red pasta, you're going to get a little bit of that pasta sauce, on those white pants. And that's an issue that we're having, is that a lighter coating shows more of the various dirt and debris and vehicle stains that are out there. They're on the black pavement, but you don't really notice it, but you notice it more in the gray pavement. But even so, with that staining, we were still getting a 10 to 12 degree difference here. We got coverage in the LA Times, the New York Times, Washington Post. And then there was this outlet called Attention, ATTN:. It's an internet outlet. And they said, oh, can we come and make a video? I said yes to everybody because we're not used to generating lots of positive PR. Usually people are angry about the pothole turnaround time or something and the storm response. So we did this little video, and that video got 20 million views on Facebook. And that was really interesting. It said that this is a very resonant topic. People feel their neighborhood is getting hotter. To a person, every person who's come out and asked what we're doing when we're, doing this, when we're, pouring that cool pavement, we say, oh, we're trying to experiment to see if we can make your neighborhood cooler. And every single person says, oh my God, my neighborhood is getting so much warmer very recently. It's a totally different conversation than global warming. That's a political conversation. But the lived experience of Angelenos is my neighborhood is getting hotter. So we wanted to get beyond this one product. So we partnered with the LA Clean Tech Incubator and the Lacretz Innovation Center, and they did a call for products. And we put 4 products out in the parking lot. And this is a place where all these innovators in our field are coming and going all the time. We thought it'd be great to show that off. So there's 4 different patches of different products, and each one has a totally different mode of action. And the upper left is a spray-on powdered ceramic, which is what they're using in Tokyo. Tokyo is the most advanced city with cool pavement so far. They're using a product that costs $8 a square foot, which is a lot of money. What we're using costs 60 cents a square foot, but we were able to try one of those type of products. In the middle is a acrylic and sand product that's also spray-on called Street Bond, and on the right was an acrylic and sand product that was mixed on site. The middle one, Street Bond, intrigued us, and it comes in lots of colors. So we've done 2 projects with Street Bond in 2019. One of them in the San Fernando Valley, where we coated a street with 2 different colors, a light half and a dark half, and we're going to see how they differ in terms of their thermal performance and their staining. And then to the right here, we did something right behind here. You can see this on your way out of town. We coated the protected bike lane behind City Hall East, and I did wait for the bus to come to take that picture. But for me, that is the future of where we're going in LA. An inboard bus boarding island, a protected bike lane that's made legible with colorful, cool pavement coatings, a street for everybody. So now we're going bigger. We're coating whole neighborhoods, 10 to 12 city blocks at a time, and we're choosing them using a data-driven approach. The Trust for Public Land has a Climate Smart Cities mapping tool that we're using to identify places where there's a climate need and a socioeconomic equity lens as well. We've done 3 neighborhood projects where we do 10 to 12 blocks to see if there's a neighborhood level cooling effect. Look at this drone picture. That's all cool pavement. That's a lot of cool pavement for something that's new. And here's the most recent test data, averaging the test day on August and the test day in July. When those days were at least 90 degrees Fahrenheit, we were consistently seeing, 9 to 12 degrees surface temperature difference, and we think that's significant. We've inspired other cities all the way down to Australia. This is a project that was done very much like one of our recent ones, and they used our data in their presentation to their city council to get the funding to do this project. So it's pretty exciting when you can have that kind of influence. So we're starting to study, well, how does the surface temperature of the roadway impact people? And we're working with different researchers at multiple universities. And one day we're able to get this instrumented cart out from Arizona State University. And you can see those little discs actually pick up radiant temperature directionally. And you can figure out, hey, you know, in the middle of the day, if I'm standing on this coating, am I getting heat from the sun that bounces off? Because I explained earlier on that's more reflective of the sun. But of course, we're not optimizing for people standing in the middle of the street in midday. So there's a lot of complex questions we have to explore about how these interventions affect human heat comfort. But now we're starting to bring it into the larger, set of tools that our agency has. And we just completed a project on East 54th Street in South LA in front of the school. We did a 2-block project where we did a cool pavement coating, green accented bike lane. We planted 18 shade trees, and we put in shaded bus benches. And we think that that's the direction we need to go. We need to keep pushing the frontier on cool road surface coatings, but tie it into already well-established shade interventions that work. We got a grant from California SB1 to do a neighborhood cooling planning project, and we picked the area around the Sherman Way stop of the Orange Line busway in the San Fernando Valley. And we worked with Councilmember Blumenfield on this. And we've hired a consultant to do this deep community process. And look at all those different interventions we offer them over there. We offer them misting systems and green alleys and different kinds of plantings, cool surfaces, shade structures. And then, we got all this deep community feedback from this neighborhood where, walking to the rail stop is important, the busway, and it's going to get hotter. It's going to be harder to use transit as the city gets hotter unless we come up with mitigations for that heat. Well, look at the renderings that they came up with, the consultant with the community's input. It's almost like remembering everything LA forgot about beautiful street design. Doesn't that look like a Parisian street? You've got multiple rows of trees. You've got different narrow areas for different modes and folks coexisting in a shaded, harmonious, multimodal environment. And so more and more we think we can use the cooling lens to help us bring more integration, inclusion, and innovation, which is the role model that Adele has taught us for our agency. So, by the way, like we said, please use the MyLA 311 app when you need our services. It's the fastest way to get through to us, and I'm happy to take any questions. Great question. So how about the striping? How about the maintenance? So the color temperature of most of these coatings looks a lot like a concrete street. And in the city of LA, about 9% of our network are concrete streets, and we have the same white markings on those concrete streets as we have on all other streets. I know some smaller cities like Santa Monica are doing like a blackout coating behind the Continental Crosswalk, but in LA we're not doing that. We're putting white markings on gray concrete streets, and this looks very similar to that. So we haven't actually had a conflict there. Regarding the maintenance, that's something we're trying to understand. We're retaining the thermal performance better on streets that have weekly street sweeping with this coating than streets that don't, because we can get a buildup of dust, ambient, dust, and it doesn't rain here for months. So, there's no kind of washing of the street that goes on naturally from rains other than in our little 3-month rainy season. So we're still trying to figure out what would we have to do to keep those coatings light enough to maintain those thermal benefits, and how long do they last? And these are things we really can only find out by having it out there and experimenting.
So what was the cost for the two-block build-out?
What was the cost for the 2-block build-out?
I think the costs are still coming back because we're just completing it. But on that particular one, we had a new product from our slurry seal manufacturer that was installed at their cost. But let's say if it had been the other product, 60 cents a square foot, you know, you could probably do a project like that for $150,000. It's not that much money. And part of what's exciting and really a reason why all of us at Streets LA are feeling really energized these days is we're looking at ways to bring together all of our existing programs. We have a tree planting program. We have a bus shelter program. You know, we more and more need to layer on all of those things intensely in a place to create a real delta from before and after, instead of have each of those programs operate on its own, touching little parts of the city.
Fantastic, Greg. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Next, unrelated technology and improvement that's going on at Streets LA, I'd like to introduce Bookie Oren, otherwise known as Bookie, from Bookie Oren Global Water Technologies. He's the CEO over the last 30 years. He's been active in a variety of industries and senior roles, including as executive chairman of Mekarot, which is Israel's national water company, but more recently he's contributing his expertise with agencies such as here in LA, technology providers and large vendors, along with global coverage and a business perspective on technology. Bookie?
Thank you very much, Scott. And again, you know, when we are talking here, I feel really that what I'm going to speak is something that is really complementary to what the impressive presentation of Greg, and it's part of the vision that, almost may I say that I understood that you get it from Mayor Garcetti, but I'm not familiar with him. I'm familiar with you, Adele. And when Adele told me, hey, Bookie, we would like to be we would like to be one of the best in the world. And it's clear that if we would like to be the best in the world, we cannot develop everything in the city. Although you are 4 million people here, 40 million people in the county, happen to be that there are some kind of like 8 billion people around us. So maybe there is a good chance that they develop something. Maybe they have the same problem. And again, when we are looking about, we are talking about global warming, happened to be that only this year, it's happened even in Montreal, but of course in many other, and we are talking here about events that happened in the last summer, or flooding is really not something that is so unique for one region. And just a joke, in Venice, it's not a flooding on their canal, it's flooding in the city. But it's happened everywhere. So people can argue if global warming is exist or not. Global warming is exist. And I think that everyone understood it. And I think that when Adele asked us, so can you support us with what you are doing? And what we are doing is travel. Again, I have a conversation with Greg if I'm complaining about my way of living, but I travel a lot. So I'm here today, tomorrow in Atlanta, then in Baltimore, then I'm going to visit Carol in Houston, coming back to Israel for 10 days, going on my way to Singapore, and 2 of my team are now in Amsterdam, relevant to and scouting for solution for Street LA. And what we try to support and that's something that, again, we are just a facilitator. But there's a process that ran out in Street LA during the last year that, first of all, I would like to say almost one disclaimer. When Adele approached to me, he didn't ask me to steal something from anyone. He just said, find a way to collaborate. But so for me to collaborate is a very structured process. First of all, listen. And we spend a lot of time with the team in Street LA to listen to what are the challenges. Only after we feel that we understand what they are looking, we begin to scout globally. And it happened to be that during the last few months, we brought to the table more than 23 solutions that are technologies that we assume that are relevant to Street LA, and initial connection with 7 peer cities around the world. And again, not everything is relevant. It needs to be very structured, and we are almost endorse feedback that say, okay, that's not relevant for us. Because at the end of the day, it's a public agency, and you need to be very effective in the way that you are running your resources. But what's happened that from the 23 solution, continue conversation with a 5 solution provider. Very important to say that we are a technology agnostic. I don't care if we are looking only for something that is relevant to the city, but all the time try to challenge the existing solution with new solution that someone else in the world is using. If it's for unofficial dumping, or if how to collect information from the road using autonomous car. So again, the idea is to do everything based on what exists there, proven there around the world, and that's very important when we try to materialize this vision to be the first or to be among the best. So technology, there are a lot of available technology around there. We need to find what is relevant to Street LA. But there are a lot of experience worldwide. So again, when we are talking about Singapore, Singapore, I don't know who have been there, but again, very recommended place because they are the most, I say, planned and structured place on earth. Because 50 years ago, there was nothing there, and currently it's one of the most beautiful cities around the world. What we felt that they are dealing and developing there, and we would like to create the exchange of know-how between them and Street LA, are the way that they are running all their trees inventory. Again, I will not go to detail now, but there is a lot of know-how that can be exchanged. And again, if we will get one good idea, it can save for us many millions and maybe many years. So a lot of a different approach of how to run the trees inventory, how to develop new technologies relating to improve the tree canopy. We are talking about shades, so in their case, I'm sorry that it's in kilometer, but again, we are talking here about a project of more than 150 miles of that they create shade over the sidewalk. In a moment, I'll approach to a different approach, but again, not all canopy will be natural. And when we are moving to the city of Amsterdam, just to say that how it's working. So last week we were sitting with the team of Street LA in their offices. This Friday they will be meeting with the city of Amsterdam about feedback that we are looking to bring from Amsterdam to Los Angeles. Again, Amsterdam, beautiful city, huge inventory of trees and all the way that they are dealing with the trees. All the way that, and again, here we have a conversation if the way that they are creating or maintain the trees are advanced or not. We would like to see it, but again, variety of concept of how to avoid the overflow in the city as part of the architecture of the city. So that's very interesting. Again, we heard about London. another city that hosts the Olympic game was Barcelona. And what is nice in Barcelona that I'm sure that we can learn from here, because again, that's the same climate like we have, Mediterranean climate, is the way that they are dealing with all their irrigation. Based on implement a very advanced irrigation system, they save 25% of the water conservation, something that I'm sure that is relevant to what we are doing here. And again, another concept of creating shade, very, again, Barcelona, the architecture in Barcelona is very nice, but here they create a very easy architecture that just create a lot of shade, beautiful streets. When we are moving now to the city of Hong Kong, something that, again, the people in the team told us that's maybe a second priority for Street LA, because they are using satellite images to identify spices in trees, something that is very easy, but we will postpone it to second priority. And something that is relevant in the city of Milan is something that they create dealing with the global warming as part of the architecture of creating, may I say, municipal forest on the building. A lot of interesting part. And almost last two things. I think that what we are enjoy to work with the team here as the part of the global journey, as part of, may I say, humbleness. That clear that if you would like to be a global leader, you must listen to other partners around the world. And this is my last slide. Everyone give his own quote, so that is mine. That I'm sure that you know this guy, but I'm sure that, and please agree with him. You don't need to know everything, but you just need to look for what you're looking, and then you'll find it. Thank you so much for this journey.
As you said, Bookie, this is a global journey, and I guess I'd like to ask Adel, what this global journey, innovation, technology means to him for Streets LA.
Thank you very much. This is great. So let me just, my whole, my 30 years in the water industry is always looking for ways to do things different, not just because we want to bring technology in, it's because we want to make and operate smarter and be more efficient and deliver services faster. We have limited resources when it comes to money, to water, to whatever we're doing. And we need to really work smart, efficient in delivering services. And one of our 4 key result areas in our strategic plan is working smart. So, we have one of the challenges we're looking at right now, and now we're looking at Mobileye as an option. We have sidewalks that are broken, and doing an assessment on sidewalks and getting that feedback on what's happening on the streets is something that's going to cost money. At the same time, we have our street sweepers that are in the streets every week, at least in every street, that we can somehow sweep the streets, provide information back, and then capture what's happening on the sidewalks and the streets, and use that as an information so we can really deploy and become proactive. And I found out in this journey that 40% of the streets are being swept and 60% are not, just because of resources. So right now we're going through a process of saying, how can we now build on technology, become a little more smart, and then expand with existing resources the area that we're sweeping, instead of once every week, maybe once every 2 weeks, measure the data in terms of how much debris we have, and then redeploy the resources, revamp your routes so you can cover the entire city with the same resources. And technology helps you with the initial investment, because the cost of technology is just a one-time cost, but the return on the investment is for the lifetime of the investment. So really what we're looking at is what fits what we need, how we can become smart, efficient. Keith Muse, who heads my paving program, and we're thinking about paving, right? We have now worked with our slurry black slurry team, and we have a new, what we call cool slurry that Greg talked about. And we're saying, is there a way we can actually apply slurry to preserve the streets while providing this cool option? And now we're kind of doing two things with the same cost. That's what's going to get us where we are. And then also, one of the challenges is there's a lot of areas that we need to address because of the weight of the buses, trucks, etc. And we see a lot of rutting. So we're trying to figure out how we can do things without really using concrete. So one idea that we came up with, and we're working on it with some folks, and we're testing it hopefully December, is integrating plastic bottles into our asphalt mix, which with the testing, it's stronger than concrete. It acts like asphalt, but as strong as concrete. It's an amazing thing. We're trying to test it. It's going to be great. But we really are dealing with two things now: providing a mix that's going to that withstand the needs that we have for providing a safe and passable streets, but also, we're having issues with plastic recycling, and maybe there's a way we can integrate the plastic bottles into our stream, and those changes, those ideas, is going to get us where we want to get to. So those are the innovations that I'm looking at. They're practical. So to me, it's always about practical solutions. It's not about something that is good to have. It's all about how can we make our operation more efficient? How can we deliver better services? How can we leverage the resources that we have to do more? That's what the customers want. That's what residents want. So we're excited about what we're doing, excited about the technologies we're looking at and getting information back, because really it's about how we can get the information quickly to us so we can deliver services. So it's a great opportunities and solutions.